First you look at this old picture of Lebanon, now you look at this picture of the same place. Do you see any difference between the two? If you don't understand, then I will explain. This picture is from before the civil war in Lebanon and this one is from after the war. So you can see how Lebanon, which was once in the list of developed countries, today comes in the list of poor countries. What is happening with the country, we will talk about it in detail in another video. For now, in today's video we are going to show you 10 countries which have been ruined. In today's video we are going to show some countries which once upon a time used to be prosperous, but today no one wants to go there. Along with that we will also tell its reason, so please watch video till the end. But before starting the video I want to request you, we put our best efforts to create our every single video. So please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's start. Number 10. Iraq. When you hear about Iraq, the first thought that comes to your mind is war, broken houses and poverty all around. But Iraq wasn't always like this. With a population of over 46 million, it is the 35th most populous country. Iraq has undergone significant changes over the past few decades, particularly before and after the wars that have affected the country. Iraq was under the rule of Saddam Hussein, who became president in 1979. His regime was marked by authoritarian control, widespread repression, and a strong central government. The Ba'ath Party, led by Saddam, dominated Iraqi politics. Iraq had a mixed economy with significant state control over key sectors like oil, which was the backbone of the economy. The country enjoyed relative prosperity during the 1970s due to high oil prices. However, the Iran-Iraq War and the Gulf War severely weakened the economy, leading to heavy debt, international sanctions, and economic hardship. Iraq was a secular state with diverse ethnic and religious communities, including Arabs, Kurds, Sunni and Shia Muslims, Christians, and others. While the regime repressed political dissent, the country had a relatively advanced infrastructure, including education and healthcare systems. However, the regime's policies and wars led to increasing social tensions, particularly between Sunni and Shia communities and between Arabs and Kurds. Iraq, often referred to as the cradle of civilization, was home to ancient Mesopotamian civilizations such as Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. The country had numerous cultural and historical sites, some of which were well preserved before the wars. The 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq resulted in the overthrow of Saddam Hussein's regime. Iraq transitioned to a federal parliamentary republic, but the country has faced ongoing political instability, corruption, and sectarian violence. The government struggles with internal divisions, and the influence of various militias and external powers like Iran has increased. The post-war period has been marked by sectarian conflict, especially between Sunni and Shia communities, and tensions with the Kurdish region in the north. Millions of Iraqis have been displaced due to violence, including the rise of ISIS, which took control of large parts of Iraq in 2014 before being driven out. Number 9. Afghanistan. There would hardly be any of you who would want to go and settle in Afghanistan in present times. According to the World Population Review, as of 2023, Afghanistan's population is 43 million. But many of these people are moving to other countries and living there. Afghanistan has experienced dramatic changes over the past several decades due to a series of conflicts, political upheavals, and foreign interventions. Prior to the Soviet invasion in 1979, Afghanistan was a monarchy under King Zahir Shah, who ruled from 1933 until he was overthrown in 1973 by his cousin, Muhammad Daud Khan. After Daud's coup, Afghanistan became a republic, but the country remained relatively stable. The political landscape was marked by a strong central government, though tribal and ethnic loyalties were significant. Afghanistan had a largely agrarian economy, with most of the population engaged in farming and herding. The country had limited infrastructure and industrial development, but it was self-sufficient in food and had a modest export of products like fruits, nuts, and wool. Afghanistan received foreign aid from both the Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War, which helped develop some infrastructure. After decades of conflict, including the Soviet-Afghan War 1979, the Civil War 1990s, the Taliban's rise to power, and the US-led invasion in 2001, Afghanistan has returned to Taliban rule as of August 2021. The Taliban, an Islamist militant group, imposed a strict interpretation of Sharia law during their previous rule and have begun to re-implement similar policies. Afghanistan's economy is in a fragile state, heavily dependent on foreign aid, which has been reduced following the Taliban's return to power. The country faces high unemployment, widespread poverty, and a lack of infrastructure. The opium trade remains a significant part of the economy, fueling both domestic and international drug markets. The societal landscape in Afghanistan has been deeply affected by decades of war and conflict. The Taliban's return to power has led to a rollback of many of the rights gained by women and minorities over the past 2 decades. Women are now largely excluded from public life, including education and employment. Afghanistan's cultural and historical sites have suffered significant damage, but Afghan cultural traditions continue to endure despite challenges. Number 8. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was once one of southern Africa's most vibrant, productive, and resilient countries. However, over the past 2 decades, a series of political and economic crises have led to a general decline in the standard of living and a breakdown in public health, education, and infrastructure. In 2023, population for Zimbabwe was 16.7 million persons. Before the economic decline, Zimbabwe was one of Africa's most prosperous countries, particularly during the 1980s and early 1990s. Known as the breadbasket of Africa, Zimbabwe had a strong agricultural sector, producing substantial amounts of tobacco, maize, and other crops. The country also had a well-developed industrial base and a robust mining sector, with rich deposits of gold, diamonds, and other minerals. Zimbabwe's infrastructure was relatively advanced, with good road networks, railways, and a functioning public services system, including healthcare and education. The early years after independence in 1980 were marked by significant improvements in social services, with the government investing in education and health, leading to high literacy rates and improved life expectancy. However, political instability, land reform policies, economic mismanagement, and hyperinflation in the 2000s led to a severe economic collapse, eroding the wealth and prosperity that Zimbabwe once enjoyed. The government printed excessive amounts of money to fund its expenditures, leading to hyperinflation. By 2008, inflation reached astronomical levels, with prices doubling every day. This hyperinflation destroyed the value of savings, wiped out pensions, and made everyday goods unaffordable, leading to widespread poverty and economic instability. The collapse of commercial agriculture, coupled with recurrent droughts, has led to chronic food insecurity. Many Zimbabweans rely on food aid, and the country has struggled to feed its population, further exacerbating poverty and social tensions. Number 7. Democratic Republic of the Congo. DRC is endowed with exceptional natural resources, including minerals such as cobalt and copper, hydropower potential, significant arable land, immense biodiversity, and the world's second-largest rainforest. Most people in DRC have not benefited from this wealth. The biggest reason for this is corruption. The Democratic Republic of the Congo was once considered one of the richest countries in Africa in terms of natural resources. The DRC, formerly known as Zaire under Mobutu Sese Seko, is endowed with vast deposits of minerals, including copper, cobalt, diamonds, gold, and one of the world's largest reserves of coltan, a crucial mineral for electronic devices. The country also has extensive forests, arable land, and significant hydroelectric potential, particularly from the Congo River. During the colonial period under Belgian rule, the DRC's economy was heavily exploited for its natural resources, particularly rubber, minerals, and agricultural products. The infrastructure, including railways, roads, and ports, was developed to facilitate the extraction and export of these resources. However, despite its natural wealth, the DRC's riches did not translate into broad-based economic development for its people. The wealth generated from the country's resources primarily benefited the colonial powers and, later, a small elite during Mobutu's rule, while the majority of the population remained impoverished. Today, despite its immense natural wealth, the DRC remains one of the poorest and most unstable countries in the world, with a significant portion of its population living in poverty, struggling with ongoing conflict and lacking access to basic services. Number 6. Libya. The country is known for its culture and history and contains some of the world's most well-preserved ruins from ancient civilizations. Libya has two major climate systems. In the south, the climate is hot and dry, characteristic of Sahara Desert. However, in the north, the Mediterranean Sea creates a milder climate. Libya today tops the list of poor countries, but it was not always so. Before its decline, Libya was one of Africa's wealthiest countries, primarily due to its vast oil reserves. Under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi, who came to power in 1969, Libya transformed from a poor desert nation into a relatively prosperous state. Libya's discovery of oil in the 1950s radically changed its economy. By the 1970s and 1980s, Libya had become one of the largest oil producers in the world. The oil sector generated substantial revenue, which Gaddafi used to fund social programs, infrastructure development, and Pan-African initiatives. Gaddafi implemented policies that provided Libyans with free healthcare, education, and subsidized housing. The country boasted one of the highest Human Development Index rankings in Africa, with a well-developed infrastructure compared to many other African nations. Revenue from oil exports allowed Libya to invest in modern infrastructure, including roads, schools, hospitals, and the ambitious Great Man-Made River Project, which provided fresh water to much of the country. Despite its wealth, Gaddafi's authoritarian rule, lack of political freedom, and his controversial international policies led to growing internal discontent. In 2011, Libya was engulfed in a civil war during the Arab Spring, which led to the ousting and death of Gaddafi. The ensuing instability, factional fighting, and the collapse of central authority have led to economic decline, infrastructure damage, and a significant decrease in the standard of living for Libyans. Number 5. Somalia. Somalia is the easternmost country in Africa, in what's known as the Horn of Africa. Somalia has an estimated population of 18.1 million, of which over 2 million live in the capital and largest city, Mogadishu. Before its decline, Somalia was considered one of the more promising nations in East Africa, with significant economic potential and a relatively stable society. Somalia's location along the Horn of Africa gave it access to key maritime trade routes, making it a strategic hub for commerce between Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. The port of Mogadishu, in particular, was a major center for trade. Somalia's long coastline, one of the longest in Africa, supported a thriving fishing industry. The rich marine resources provided a livelihood for many coastal communities and contributed to the economy. In the 1960s and 1970s, Somalia received considerable foreign aid and investment, which helped develop infrastructure, education, and healthcare. The country had a functioning government and relatively good public services compared to many other African nations. However, the assassination of President Siad Barre in 1991 plunged Somalia into a civil war, leading to the collapse of the central government. The country has since been mired in conflict, clan warfare, and piracy, which have devastated its economy, infrastructure, and social fabric. Today, Somalia struggles with poverty, food insecurity, and ongoing violence, despite efforts at rebuilding and achieving political stability. Number 4. Haiti. Haiti is known for its rich folklore traditions. The country has many magical tales that are part of the Haitian Vodou tradition. The Haitian dictator Pathak was a strong believer in the country's folklore and used elements of it to guide his brutal rule of the country during the Duvalier dynasty. Haiti is the third largest country in the Caribbean, and with an estimated population of 11.4 million, is the most populous Caribbean country. Haiti was once one of the wealthiest colonies in the world during the 18th century, known as the Pearl of the Antilles. Haiti's plantations were highly productive, with vast exports of sugar and coffee fueling the French economy. By the late 1700s, Saint-Domingue produced about 60% of the world's coffee and 40% of the sugar consumed in Europe. The wealth generated from these exports made Haiti the crown jewel of France's overseas empire. The colony's success played a crucial role in the development of European economies during the 18th century. Haiti's wealth was built on the exploitation of enslaved Africans. The Haitian Revolution, a successful slave revolt, led to the country's independence in 1804. However, this victory came at a high economic cost. The newly independent nation was diplomatically isolated and forced to pay a massive indemnity to France in exchange for recognition, plunging the country into debt. The destruction during the revolution, the indemnity payments, and ongoing political instability severely weakened Haiti's economy. Over time, the country struggled with poverty, lack of infrastructure, and external interference, which eroded its early prosperity. Haiti's transition from one of the wealthiest colonies to the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere is a stark example of how exploitation, external pressures, and historical injustices can devastate a nation's economic prospects. Haiti's crime rate has been increasing in recent years, with a 119.4% increase in homicides in 2023 compared to 2022. In 2023, the homicide rate in Haiti was 40.9 per 100,000 people, which is more than double the rate in 2022. Kidnappings also increased by 83% in 2023, with 2,490 victims compared to 1,359 in 2022. The first quarter of 2024 was the most violent period since 2022, with around 2,500 people killed or injured in gang violence, a 53% increase from the previous quarter. Number 3, Yemen. Yemen is in the news a lot these days, especially because of the Houthis. But Yemen was not always like this, rather it used to be in the list of prosperous countries. The population of Yemen was about 33 million according to 2021 estimates. Yemen, historically, was once a prosperous and culturally rich region, often referred to as Arabia Felix, meaning fortunate Arabia. In ancient times, Yemen was home to prosperous kingdoms like Saba, Himyar. These kingdoms thrived due to their control over the incense trade routes, particularly the lucrative trade in frankincense and myrrh, which were highly valued in the ancient world. The wealth generated from this trade made Yemen a significant and prosperous region. In more recent history, particularly during the Ottoman Empire, Yemen was famous for its coffee production. Mocha, a port city in Yemen, became a major center for the coffee trade, giving its name to the popular coffee variety mocha. Over time, Yemen's prosperity declined due to internal strife, invasions, and the collapse of the ancient trade routes. The country became fragmented into various tribal regions, which weakened its economic and political cohesion. In the 20th century, Yemen was divided into two states, North Yemen and South Yemen, each with its own challenges. After unification in 1990, the country faced significant issues, including poverty, corruption, and lack of infrastructure. The ongoing conflict since 2015 has further devastated Yemen, leading to a severe humanitarian crisis. Yemen's rich history as a center of trade and culture contrasts sharply with its current struggles, highlighting how historical shifts, political instability, and modern conflicts can erode a nation's wealth and prosperity. Yemen has now become home to some terrorist organizations, including Houthis. Number 2, Venezuela. Venezuela is a developing country having the world's largest known oil reserves and has been one of the world's leading exporters of oil. Previously, the country was an underdeveloped exporter of agricultural commodities, such as coffee and cocoa, but oil quickly came to dominate exports and government revenues. The things I have said above have become old. Before its current economic crisis, Venezuela was one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, largely due to its vast oil reserves. In the mid-20th century, Venezuela emerged as a major oil producer, with the discovery of significant oil reserves transforming the country's economy. The oil boom, particularly during the 1970s, brought substantial wealth and positioned Venezuela as one of the largest oil exporters in the world. The influx of oil revenue led to rapid economic growth and development. Venezuela used its oil wealth to invest in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. During this period, the country experienced high levels of prosperity and modernization. The oil revenue allowed for substantial improvements in living standards. Venezuela had one of the highest per capita incomes in Latin America, with a well-developed social welfare system, including subsidized housing and healthcare. Beginning in the late 1990s and accelerating in the 2000s, Venezuela faced economic challenges due to mismanagement of oil revenues, corruption, and policy decisions that led to economic instability. The sharp decline in global oil prices starting in 2014 significantly impacted Venezuela's economy, as oil was the country's primary source of revenue. The drop in oil income exacerbated existing problems and led to a severe economic crisis. The economic downturn was accompanied by political turmoil, social unrest, and a humanitarian crisis. Hyperinflation, food and medicine shortages, and mass emigration have further destabilized the country. Venezuela's transformation from a wealthy oil-driven economy to a nation facing severe economic and social crises underscores the volatility of economies heavily reliant on a single resource and the impact of governance and global market fluctuations. Number 1. Syria. The condition of Syria is also similar to that of Iraq. You understand that Syria and Iraq are two brothers drowned in the same bucket. Before the ongoing conflict, Syria was relatively prosperous and had a diverse economy with several key strengths. Syria had a well-developed agricultural sector, benefiting from its fertile land and irrigation systems. Major crops included wheat, barley, cotton, and olives, contributing significantly to the country's economy and providing a substantial portion of its export earnings. Syria had modest oil reserves compared to other Middle Eastern countries but still enjoyed significant oil production. The oil sector was an important part of the economy, generating revenue for the government and contributing to economic growth. Syria's location at the crossroads of trade routes, including the Silk Road, historically made it a vital trade hub. Cities like Damascus and Aleppo were renowned for their historical significance and vibrant trade. The outbreak of the Syrian civil war in 2011 led to widespread destruction and devastation. The conflict severely damaged infrastructure, disrupted agriculture and oil production, and led to a massive humanitarian crisis. The war caused economic collapse, with rampant inflation, a shattered economy, and loss of government revenue. The destruction of infrastructure and the loss of tourism revenues further exacerbated the economic downturn. The conflict resulted in significant loss of life, displacement of millions of people, and severe shortages of basic necessities, including food, water, and medical supplies. Syria's transition from a relatively prosperous nation with a diverse economy to one facing severe economic and humanitarian challenges highlights the impact of conflict on a country's stability and development.